Hello, we're the LorcanaTwins, and we're back with a video to talk about our latest tournament run.
Yes, the tournament was the Pack, Merlin Strikes Back. It was held on February 3rd. It was run by Thea Boyson, and it was a very nice tournament with 154 players. The Swiss rounds were on Saturday, and the top cut was top 16 this time around, and that was held on Sunday.
Yep, it was a lot of fun, and this time we played very different decks, so we're going to get into that very shortly here, and we'll save the best for last. He outperformed me this time, so
Just a little bit.
we will start with the list that I played. And that is right here. It is called A Whole New Harmony, and it was a little unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't quite the perfect harmony I was hoping for, but it was still a lot of fun to play. So I will get into the list and kind of talk about the rounds that I experienced. First off, we have the ballroom sensation there, Cinderella, an amazing singer at the one drop spot. Always love to see her in the opening hand. Hercules package was being included in this deck, and then Prince Eric, a couple of him to be a little more defensive. His 3 willpower is, very good, and as you see, a lot of these characters in the deck are rocking at least 3 willpower. Gets around some of those 2 damage removal spells that are pretty prevalent in the meta right now. And then Robin Hood, just running 2 because he is uninkable, but that is a very fun card, I think. Against certain matchups, it just feels great to be able to ping down Lilos or little one-drop Maleficents. And then it just helps you kind of add damage and stack it up with your other removal spells, because, sometimes a Grab Your Sword will only deal 2 to something that has 3 willpower, so it just helps to be able to ping that 3rd damage with him. And then, you can't do a song deck without Ariel right there at the 3-drop slot. Helps you look through your deck for a song out of the top 4. And, sometimes she whiffs, but, sometimes she grabs you that song you're looking for. So
She whiffs for me pretty frequently, but
Yeah.
I still appreciate her.
There were definitely a couple games where I was really needing that whole new world. And I know I played a couple Ariel, and both of them didn't find a single song. So that was a little disappointing, but there's some variance and luck involved, and she did hit plenty of songs too throughout the tournament, so it's fun to play nonetheless. And another cool singer next to her is Gaston. I really like his 3 strength, because when you use him to sing a song, it opens him up to being challenged on the follow-up turn. And with as much Ruby Amethyst in the meta that there's a lot of, the snake or the fox that can come and run in, and they would take out Ariel without her taking them out in return. But Gaston at least does a 1-for-1 trade with them, so that's really cool, and I think it felt good to play Gaston, especially if you already, let's say, had a bunch of songs in hand, and maybe you had a whole new world, so you didn't feel like you needed to dig for any other songs with Ariel. You could just play him down and use him to sing that, and then he'd be a decent board presence.
Yeah, he's definitely a little bit beefier than that Ariel. I think it's all those eggs he eats, so...
Oh yeah, so then we have Benja, just a couple of copies, but it's good to take out some items that are seeing play in the meta, like Fishbone Quill if you're against Sapphire decks, the Spellbook if you're against an aggro, Ruby Amethyst or other type of deck, and then Cinderella, just 1 copy of the 4-drop. Now this was just, I don't know, I thought I'd like to try a Cindy that doesn't see a whole lot of play, and also I liked the idea of her 5 willpower. Because a lot of times with the Ariel or the Gaston, they can sing 5 like Cinderella, but, a smash or other 3 damage removal option would take them out, whereas it's really hard to use just straight damage removal on this Cinderella if she's not exerted. So yeah, I played her since she can also sing songs like A Whole New World and Grab Your Sword, and it did pay off a little bit, and then she could also shift into the 7-cost Cinderella that we'll see in a little bit. So, it just seemed like a flexible thing to test out. And then a few copies of Rapunzel, just a great card draw option. And also, I liked her 5 willpower and her 2 lore. So once you have healed something up, drawn some cards, and she's free to quest from there on out. And the Beast, who is very prevalent in the meta right now.
He is.
Definitely a great card to include in this list. I love that he can also sing any song in the deck, and then on top of that, if he's not damaged, he'll draw you an extra card at the start of your turn, which does help you dig for those other cards you're looking for in this matchup. And then the shiftable Hercules as well, just a nice shift target to also allow you to shift up and surprise your opponent. With him, maybe start singing higher cost songs earlier. And against steel matchups, his resist +2 really helps just nullify all their damage. and they'll really have to wonder like what they can do to deal with him. And outside of maybe the 7-drop Cinderella, like most things don't trade too favorably with him. So a great fun card to include there, and I'm a big fan of Hercules, so really cool to see him played in a deck. And then next up is the Giant Tinkerbell, which is very great against aggro and shutting that down. Also a shiftable, singable target, though we're not playing the lower cost Tinkerbell in this list. And finally, for the characters, there's the 7-drop Cinderella with 3 lore, resist +2, and a 5/5 stat line. So also a good option to be able to shift onto either of the earlier Cinderellas that are played in the deck, and then a pretty good, questing threat in the late game. So then we'll move into some of the songs, if you want to talk about those.
Yeah, it looks like you ran 2 copies of World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which I suppose in the mirror match, if you're against another Amber Steel deck, if they get out their Cinderella or their Divine Hero Hercules, those are good targets for the World's Greatest Criminal Mind. Let the Storm Rage on, just very good for cycling in the early game and removing characters that have low willpower, so you can definitely sing that with Cinderella on turn 2 as well, so that's nice. Just kind of a way for you to control the early game board and kind of keep the pressure on as you cycle and draw cards. Strength of a Raging Fire, very nice if you can kind of go wide and then remove whatever they play to try to combat your early game characters. So, very good if you can clear a snake with this by, dropping a couple minions, and then because if they have nothing to bounce, you can kind of predict more easily what they might play on subsequent turns. So, like using that in the Ruby Purple matchup. A Whole New World, of course. Very good card for kind of dictating when you get to have a new hand, and if you think your opponent is holding some strong cards, you can use this to kind of cycle those away and get a new hand. And then Grab Your Sword, of course, very good for like clearing minions on your opponent's side of the board, just helping control the board more in your favor. And then Sleepy's Flute, of course, is what kind of ties this deck together against the Ruby Purple, because if they end up being able to wipe your board, this is a consistent way to continue to generate lore whenever you play songs on subsequent turns.
Yeah, I've had some great games against Ruby Amethyst with a list like this before, especially if you get a few of these flutes out. Maybe you're at 14 lore and you just sing a song, you're up to 17, and then, the next time you sing a song, you can go to 20, unless they can steal some lore back. It just creates some inevitability about the deck, and especially in the late game, this deck might struggle against Ruby Amethyst or decks that play Be Prepared. If they're able to wipe the board you've been working all game to set up, but at least those flutes can kind of help you get across the finish line. I don't know, for me during the tournament they were just a little off key. They weren't quite playing like I was hoping, but I don't know, it's a very fun card. Very cool looking card too, and it was great to have in the deck. I definitely think it gives it a little more of an edge over a song deck that isn't running the flutes.
Yeah, I do feel like decks like this, like when they pop off, it can just be so much fun, and they can run really smoothly. But then because there's certain cards you kind of want to see in a certain order, if it doesn't really line up, it can feel a little clunky too. So do you want to just talk a little bit about your run in the tournament?
Yeah, sure. So first round, I was against an Emerald Amber aggressive deck, and so this ended up being a fairly good matchup for me because of all this, early game removal. I was able to shut down their board before it got going too much. Game 2 was a bit closer. They were at 14 lore, but yeah, there was just so much removal on my side of the board that I was able to, develop a big board, and it just so happened that I had cards out like the Beast, so I didn't need to sing myself a new hand because I had way more options left in hand than the opponent did because they were trying to empty their aggressive cards onto the field. So that was good. And then the next round, I ended up playing against an Emerald Steel discard list. So this also, it was tight in game 2 especially, but I was able to go 2-1 against that. And I do think with the AoE damage this deck has that can remove the targets like, John and Bucky that you might not be able to hit in other matchups.
Yep.
That really helped out a lot. And then, of course, I always tried to play Whole New World when my hand was getting low before they could discard my entire hand. And then that just really, kept them off of their game plan. It was a close match, but it was fun to play and got it done there. And then round 3, I ended up getting matched into a mirror match. And that was a very tight, close round. In one of the games, I was able to claw it back because of the World's Greatest Criminal Mind. The opponent had spent their entire ink one turn dropping the the 7 cost Cinderella, and that really opened the window for me because I had the song to sing that and then develop a bigger board of my own. But yeah, we went to game 3 in that one, and yeah, we were each like a turn away from winning, and they got it done in the end. But that was a fun, tight match as well. Then the next round kind of escapes me at the moment what I was against, but it went well for me. And then after that, I was sitting at 3-1, and then the final 2 rounds I played, I got matched into Ruby Amethyst, and I was excited to see how it would play out. A couple of the games I drew really bad. Like one of the games I had kind of sang everything off the board, but then it just kind of fizzled out, and I didn't have any hand refill. And even though I tried to dig with 2 aerials, I just couldn't find any more card draw. So then they kind of overtook me there, and but yeah, so then I lost there, and then I lost to the second Ruby Amethyst as well. And yeah, none of those were like too close for me. I did think the deck had a better chance than what it kind of showed or what I experienced in those, but overall it was still a lot of fun. It was fun to try something different, and yeah, it's a very fun deck to play, especially when it's popping off. So, but yeah, that's how I went. I decided just to bow out when I was 3-3, and then cheer my brother on from the sidelines. So, and also I hadn't been to our weekend locals in a while. I hadn't been able to make it, and that's when they do single player. So that was later that same night, and I thought, well, I guess now that I probably can't make the top cut, I can go to that instead. So I had to throw a deck together. But now we'll take a look at my brother's deck, because he was able to place second in the tournament overall, which was very impressive. So we will take a look right now.
So my deck I call definitely not meta, because there's hardly anyone playing Ruby Amethyst right now. But I decided for this tournament that I would just give it a try. I know how popular it's been, and I really haven't played it very much, but it seems pretty straightforward to me. So I kind of took a look at multiple different lists and then made some adjustments for things I wanted to see in my deck instead of kind of what everybody's using.
I'd say we don't usually always love to gravitate toward the meta decks, but
yeah, I kind of shy away from that usually.
But yeah, in the past, like, that hasn't always worked out the best for us. So we thought, when we're playing these big tournaments, might as well see if we can perform well on some of those top tier meta decks, and I think it's definitely been helping. So yeah, take it away with your list.
So for 1-drops, I played the very basic Olaf and Mini. I put 1 extra Olaf there in Mini just because I kind of like the happy vibe he's giving me. But anyway, so 7 1-drops, and then from there 3 Cuscos at the 2-drop spot and 4 of the Madam Mim Snake, and then 1 copy of Pinocchio Talkative Puppet. So depending on the matchup that I'm against, if I want to go wide, I like to drop the Cusco after the 1-drop just to kind of put more pressure down. But if you're in a matchup where you really need the stats on board, then I think it's always a good idea to pick up your Mini or your Olaf with the Madam Mim Snake, just so you have a nice 3/3 stat line on there that you can either continue to quest with or challenge something, usually making a positive trade. The Pinocchio, I wanted that as an answer to aggressive decks. Particularly one I was kind of scared of being against was the Ruby Amethyst version that runs Arthurs and LeFous.
Right.
Because this deck is pretty bad at getting at those characters if they're always ready and not being exerted and presenting a challenge opportunity. So this Pinocchio in the early game gives you a chance to exert the Arthur, before he gets to do his bounce shenanigans, and then use your Snake to trade into the Arthur if you have that on the board already. So that'd be a nice turn 3 play to drop this Pinocchio, exert the Arthur, and then remove it with your Snake. Another matchup it's kind of good against is there's a lot of people playing Dock right now to try to get out an early 5-drop on turn 3. So there was one of my matches where it came in handy to exert the Dock before it ever got to quest and then use the Snake to clear it. So that was a really big tempo killer for my opponent that game.
I suppose there's some aggressive Tiana decks going around too that maybe they drop a Lilo on 1, and if you went first and already had an Olaf or Mini, you could tap down the Lilo and just take her out before she ever quests for 2.
Yep, that's another great use for it as well. And so then, pretty standard after that to use the 4 Madam Mim Fox. I ran 3 copies of Maleficent Sorceress just to try to draw cards if you didn't have the Fox, or if the Fox wasn't a good timing for that. I put Merlin Crab in there at 1 copy. there's times when challenging just isn't relevant. So in that case, playing him directly on 3 doesn't always feel good. So I didn't want too much of it. But if you add him to the strength of Minnie Mouse Surfer, you can use that to clear one of your opponent's Minnie Mouse Surfers if they've exerted one. So that was kind of one slight tech option I used as a way to combat enemy Mini Surfers. Then I have 2 copies of Fidget as another way to handle Minnie, just since I know how popular she is, and I figured there'd be a lot of Ruby Amethyst players running 4 of her. Then 4 copies of Goat and Rabbit. I think of the 2, Rabbit is my favorite card in this deck probably, just because I think, especially in the mirror matchup, whoever draws more cards tends to be in a much better position. So just bouncing Rabbit as many times as you can to guarantee that you're cycling pretty far into your deck usually seems to give you an edge. The Goat, of course, is a great finisher at the end of the game. It's nice if you can keep bouncing it back to hand, kind of protecting it that way and just getting free lore that they can't really stop you from getting.
Right.
Peter Pan's Shadow, I really love that card. I put only 1 in there because I was worried about the uninkables in this deck, especially with 4 Ursula and 1 Elsa. Those are pretty high at the cost curve, and 4 Be Prepared as well. So sometimes in testing before I finalized my list, I just found like it was getting too many uninkables stuck, and you don't want to get stuck at like 6 ink and then draw an uninkable when all you've got is some Ursulas and Elsas in your hand. So I cut Peter Pan's Shadow down to 1, but in the tournament it really helped a lot in order to, like, playing it on 4 if you already have a Fox on your side of the board, and then surprise, like, getting rid of their mini with the Fox. And then from then on out, you can just kind of quest with Fox and Peter Pan's Shadow if you want.
Yeah, I love how versatile that is, and just the fact that it's another evasive threat like Mini, even if you're like leading the lore gain race, like you can just drop it down and quest for 2 every turn, and that 3 willpower helps it stick.
Yeah, I know a couple of my matches when I was playing going second and coming from behind, the Peter Pan's Shadow really turned the tide, and then suddenly I was questing for a lot more than they were, and they didn't have removal for it, so it kind of forced them to be prepared first, and that's always a really bad tempo loss in that matchup. So really like what he can do there, and even if you're just against someone who's playing aggro characters, the fact that he can rush in and deal 2 damage, sometimes that's enough to clear something and keep him alive, so that's helpful. I ran 3 copies of Maui. He's great, you could certainly play 4. I thought, though, that expecting a lot of Ruby Amethyst mirror matches, I don't like that he has no lore, and he's not always needed to make trades with, because sometimes their board is just full of a lot of annoying characters that benefit them when they die in some way. So he's kind of expensive for just removing a character you probably don't care too much about. So I only put 3 in there. I think if you're against aggro decks where his trade power is necessary, there's already a lot of Madam Mim Fox there that has good strength, and the Crab can help make good trades using your lower cost units as well. So I feel like there's enough combat in the deck to kind of get around the aggro decks too. I ran 2 copies of Yzma. I like this as a way to either give yourself more card draw. So it's nice to send one of your characters back into your deck and then draw 2 cards if you need more resources. And also, if there's like a character that you absolutely need to remove on their side of the board, it's nice that Yzma can target, what you want. Tremaine's very popular right now, but she's kind of starting to fall out of favor a bit, I think. And I ran 2 copies just because when she's great, she's really great. But a lot of people play around her, so you kind of have to set up the board in a way that lets you get benefit out of her. And one combo I did find interesting too is a lot of people will play like Ursula and a 1-drop when they have 8 resources to kind of protect against Tremaine. But there was a game where I was able to play Pinocchio to exert their 1-drop, trade that out, and then drop Tremaine, so they had to get rid of their Ursula. And like that's kind of a fun combo with the Pinocchio too, and you can pick him up and use him multiple times throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, I think Tremaine's definitely still very powerful, and sometimes the opponent doesn't have the ability to play around it. They might be sitting on just a couple expensive characters left in their hand and can only play 1 per turn, so yeah, still, it's a very big threat, and I think just the threat that it might be in your deck, they don't know if it's there or not, but the threat that it is might, cause them to play slower too, or to play around it when really they shouldn't. So I don't know, overall, very strong card.
And even though there's only 2, there's a lot of cards that bounce in the deck, so you can replay her and kind of pick her back up, and then your opponent knows like, oh, I've got to keep playing around this, or it's going to come down again and punish me. So good card to include. 4 Ursula is what I played here. I think it's just very nice on turn 7 to be able to play an Ursula. It puts a lot of pressure on your opponent, and it might force them to be prepared first, and then if you've got a nice hand with more units to kind of put out there, you can continue to pressure them, and they certainly don't want to continue to spend all their be prepareds early and then run out of the option of removal too quickly. So she's great, and the Lorlas comes in handy. The card draw is always nice, and then if you need to, you can always sing Be Prepared with her. That's a great line as well. One copy of Elsa, I think she can be quite strong.
Absolutely.
I love using her to kind of tap down enemy singers, so that it makes the opponent's turn kind of awkward if they were planning to sing with something that they no longer can. Maybe they thought they were going to be outracing you, but now that they can't quest with two things, and suddenly you have a 3-lore Elsa, possibly even an Ursula before that. That really can force a Be Prepared if you're in the mirror matchup, and it's just great to kind of control the flow of gameplay. So really like the Elsa, and then against aggro, she can tap down a lot of lore worth of questers, and kind of they maybe thought they had the win, but she can kind of help you just catch back up.
And if you have enough ink and you can bounce her back and replay her in the same turn, like that just really locks them out. So that's really nice. And yeah, especially in the case of like freezing an opposing Ursula, so they never got to quest with the Ursula, they don't get to sing Be Prepared.
Yep.
It just feels really good. So yeah.
She's one I thought about playing maybe 2 copies of as well, but just based on her cost, I figured I would try to get away with 1. Then Teeth and Ambitions, I only played 2. I think that's kind of low, but I also, in the mirror matchup, I don't really like that card very much. The only thing I use it for typically in that matchup is to get rid of to put 2 damage on a Minnie Mouse Surfer if I have my own, and no other way to deal damage to her. I can finish her off with my own Minnie. But generally, unless you're against an aggro deck, I don't really love that card, and if you're inking something and then playing that, I feel like you run out of cards pretty fast, so I didn't want too much of that in the deck. Plus, if you're in the mirror, like, it's a really bad late game top deck. You just kind of rather have some characters, so I played 2, but it is pretty nice to have sometimes, because this deck doesn't have a lot of ways to deal damage to enemy units that aren't exerted.
Another use for it would be if you have your Surfer Mini and they play like a Fidget or a Cruella or a Jafar that can attack evasives, you could use Teeth and Ambitions to take them out, so your Mini can keep surfing.
Yes, and then the last 8 cards in the deck are pretty standard. The Friends on the other side to keep drawing a lot of cards and be prepared when you need to wipe the opponent's board. So overall, the first day of the tournament, I went 7-1 in the Swiss rounds. My first 2 matchups were Ruby Amethyst, and they were both very tight. I think I went 2-1 in each of them, so really close, tight games. But then round 3, I was against a Amber Emerald Mufasa list, and that one was really aggressive, and it was a fun test to try against, because I really hadn't played against that very much, and I knew it could potentially counter this deck. And it did win one of the 2 games, but luckily Elsa came in big handy in game 3 of that, and also one of the other game I won, Pinocchio exerting Doc, and then trading that out immediately on turn 3. That really swung that game in my favor and made that one pretty good. After that, round 4, I played Sapphire Steel, and my opponent was actually the person who I ended up playing in the finals of day 2, and I got absolutely destroyed by this player in round 4. This 2-0'd me. They had like really good timing on the whole New Worlds, and I lost a couple Be Prepareds, multiple of the games, and just very early on I could tell it was not going well, so not the funnest match of the day. But then from there, my next matchup, I saw another Ruby Amethyst, and that one went well for me. I think it was a nice 2-0. After that, I did run into an aggressive Steel Amber Tiana deck, and I just had really good hands that game. I had multiple Mauis, so a lot of the minions that they were playing in that deck just can't withstand the stats of Maui. And they did have 3 Tianas down at one point at the same time, but I was able to crash in with a couple Mauis and use what was on my board to get rid of the rest. And they still got pretty high in the lore count, but I had enough tools there to kind of stop them from achieving their game plan. And then I did run into, I think, 2 more Ruby Amethysts at the end of the day, and both of those were close as well, but I managed to get the wins there. So I felt like this deck was playing really well into opponents' Ruby Amethyst decks. Since that was a matchup, I was able to win every time, but again, many of them were very close, coming down to just a point or two of lore at the end. So some really tough games. And then in day 2, I made it to top 16. So the first round I was against another Amber Steel Tiana list, and I found that list really, really intriguing, and it seemed to be doing a lot of aggressive things.
That can definitely threaten the Ruby Amethyst decks, especially if Tiana's able to be exerted and them having, no cards in hand, then you can't use your removal spells, like Be Prepared. So
yeah, my opponent told me after the game that in their first game they had like a lot of uninkables and weren't able to do what they were hoping. So I was able to win that one going second, which was lucky, because then game 2 they went first again, and I had nothing to play until turn 3, and they had a really aggressive start. Mm-hmm. So that was a bad round, and so then I was getting nervous, but game 3 went pretty well for me there. So then I got to move on to the second round, which
I would say Maui, was very important in that matchup. Just looking at his stats, like he can deal with Tiana, very easily, and any of the bodyguards that might be protecting her. And the Fox is, pretty good against bodyguards like the Prince and Hercules. And Hercules would take the Fox back out in exchange, but At least it helps you then open up the rest of the field to be challenged.
So then for round 2, I played another Ruby Amethyst mirror matchup, and that one I believe was pretty tight, but I did get it done. And then in top 4, I had another Ruby Amethyst matchup, which also was very tight, and I was looking at my hand thinking like, there's no way I'm going to win this, and I was really playing from behind, going second there. But luckily I held on to my Elsa for a very long time, because I just kept thinking like, well, if I play this now, I don't know what I have in hand to deal with their board on the following turn. So I kept thinking like, I need to just dig a little deeper in the deck. So I played Rabbit one turn when I could have played Elsa, and I started trying to bounce that around and see what I could find. And I did lock out into drawing Be Prepared a couple times in that game, like right around when I absolutely wanted and maybe needed it. So definitely was a tight game, but was able to just get that done in the end, and then moved on to the final round, which I already knew I had lost to that player 2-0 the previous day. So I wasn't feeling too confident. But I thought, it couldn't go worse than it did the day before, because those rounds were just so bad. So I thought both of these games were a lot closer than the ones on Saturday, but I did get 2-0 again in the finals. I think game 2 I got to 19 lore. Like, I probably did some stuff wrong in there, but I don't know that it would have made a difference, because my hands were pretty bad both of those games, and I think they found kind of what they needed at each moment. But he was a great player, so props to him, and it was a very fun tournament, and I did not expect to get that far. So I'm just happy it went well.
Yeah, it was exciting to see it go so well for you, and second place, can't do much better than that.
Except you did get first, so
well, different tournament. I did recall now my 4th round that I couldn't remember initially was another mirror match, so I was able to win that one, but I was surprised to see 2 Steel Amber Sun opponents. I didn't expect it to be too popular, but I guess in the previous tournament I know Zepha had piloted a similar list, and that's kind of where I drew some inspiration from, and it just looked like he had a lot of fun with that. So it was cool to see I could at least win one of the mirror matches. And overall a very fun tournament, again hosted by the Pack and Tia Boyson. And it sounds like she's maybe planning to do one more tournament potentially before set 3 comes out. So that is definitely something to keep your eyes out for if you're interested in that.
Yeah, if you're not quite sick of the set 2 meta,
But there was a rumor, if it does happen, it could potentially be a 2v2 or 3v3 format, and I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what that would even look like, but we'll have to stay posted for more information.
Yeah, but this was a very fun tournament, and now we thought we would look at just a few spoilers for set 3. There's been a lot of spoilers recently these past couple weeks, so we're just going to pick a few.
They're really ramping up the reveals, and it's been fun seeing some of what's in store for us.
Absolutely, and especially today there was a new legendary Mickey Mouse. We're not quite going to get into him, but that looks very exciting, and I know there's got to be tons more of unrevealed cards that are going to add more interesting deck building concepts into play. But we will get into the first one here. This is Rise of the Titans, and it was originally revealed on the Hobbies and Happiness channel. So I'm a big fan of them for sure. It always looks like they're having so much fun together.
Yep.
Just great to see that, and the way they They also do some budget decks and some, meta decks as well, and just have fun playing together with the real cards. So that's really cool to see. And yeah, we've been big fans of them. But here it is. It's Rise of the Titans, a 3-cost inkable action. And it says banish chosen location or item. And as big fans of Hercules, I think it's really cool to see all the Titans here on one card together, being very destructive, and which is very fitting because you can pick any location or item and banish it right off the table. And I think before I'd seen this card revealed, like we'd seen some locations revealed that seemed like they had the potential to be really strong, especially like Tiana's Palace comes to mind, because when you have that in play, it says your characters there can't be challenged. And it has 8 willpower, so for some decks, if you're just not building very combat focused and your units don't have good stats, that might be a big hurdle to overcome, taking down that location. But here for the low cost of 3 ink, you can just banish any location you want or any item that's giving you too much trouble. So I think the existence of this card will make people a little more worried about, like, is it a safe time to play my location, or do I need to wait till I have enough ink to start using my location right away in case this comes down? I don't know. I think it's really cool that there's this option, and it also makes me wonder if there will be cards that could maybe give your locations or items ward, to protect against this card too. So
yeah, I think this card has a lot going for it, just based on the flexibility of it too, because maybe you're against someone who isn't using locations, but maybe they're playing an item deck, or some decks just have 1 or 2 items that kind of support them and supplement them and make them better. And then if locations are pretty big, this is a great answer to those. So regardless of what you're against, you might have a target for this, and if you don't, it's at least inkable. So you're never going to feel like you're completely wasting a deck slot here. If locations aren't very big in the meta, but items are, then it's still good. Vice versa, it's still good. And if none of those types of things are too prevalent, maybe you'd still run a couple copies just in case. So it's very flexible, and I think that's nice.
Yes. And then we will move on to the second one.
So this is Pluto, Friendly Pooch. He's a 1-cost uninkable 0/2 Storyborn ally with 1 lore.
And this was revealed by the citizens of Lorcana team, which was very cool to see. We're big fans of them as well. And they were one of the first content creators for Lorcana that we came across, and we've loved listening to their podcast ever since.
Yeah, they have a great podcast, usually every Friday, so it's always a fun listen in the morning. Mm-hmm. His ability is Good Dog, so if you exert him, you pay 1 less for one less ink for the next character you play this turn. So it's a lot like the 3-cost Doc, except Doc's ability triggers when he quests. This is an exert effect, so this isn't as aggressive for lore since you're exerting and not gaining lore with him, but it's a nice ramp tool for sure on the form of a body. And what I like about this is on turn 2, you can ramp out a 3-cost character. So you could play Pluto into Doc, and then if they didn't have an answer to your Pluto immediately, if you get a second use out of him and you can use your Doc, now you can play a 5-cost on turn 3. So, who wouldn't want to play like a Tragic Hero Beast on turn 3? I think that'd be pretty nice. Of course, you could already do that with Just in Time, but not everyone wants to run like an uninkable action that kind of serves one purpose. So this kind of helps you build a wider board while you're also ramping out. So I really like Pluto. I think he's going to kind of force people to play early removal in case like the ramp that he offers is too much of a threat. So it's nice that he has 0 stat line. If you're the opponent, you can hit into this without really getting punished, but you're going to want to have answers to this early so that he doesn't just kind of run over you. And there is a nice shift target for this as well, so I think people will probably try to ramp into that and give that deck idea a test. But basically playing anything that costs more at earlier turns than you normally could is always going to be strong and like putting pressure on the opponent. So I think this Pluto, a lot of people will try to make this work, and I don't think you're going to have to try too hard because it does good things. So
yeah, and like looking at the background in this card, it looks like Pluto's hanging out somewhere where that Mickey Mouse 6-cost card from set 2 was at as well. So interesting to see. It looks like very similar artwork in the back, so it's cool how it kind of ties in.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, today, revealed by the Disney Lorcana team, we have Ariel, Adventurous Collector. Now, this is a super rare Ariel card, 3-cost inkable, 2 strength, 3 willpower, 1 lore, and the evasive keyword. So we actually have an evasive Ariel now. And then the ability Inspiring Voice, which says whenever you play a song, chosen character of yours gains evasive until the start of your next turn. So right away, I think this seems like it has a lot of potential applications. You could slot it right into the Ruby Amethyst deck that's very popular now. It's like a alternative to Mini, or in addition to Mini Mouse Surfer as well. You could have, 2 different 3-cost evasive units. I know she quests for 1 less, but she does set up some defensive potential. So let's say in the mirror match, your opponent has the evasive Mini down, and you play this one, and then maybe they quest with their Mini. Well, if you had, let's say, a Madam M Snake in play as well, then maybe you sing Friends on the Other Side with this aerial, and all of a sudden you give your Madam M Snake evasive, and she's able to take out the aerial, and it doesn't really interrupt your flow of your play or anything like that. It's very smooth, and so that's like a defensive option. But maybe you're in an aggressive deck. Maybe you're playing that 2-cost Pinocchio that has 3 lore. You could quest with him and then sing a song with her, and then give Pinocchio evasive so they can't challenge into him. I know right now decks playing him, maybe they'll try to restand him with LeFou, but giving him evasive would just be a different option of protecting him and keeping your lore and your aggressive board going. I think that's really cool.
And there's right now, Amber, I think, is an ink that doesn't really have any evasive units that I can think of right now. So if you run this aerial, maybe now you can play kind of an aggressive Amber deck and start giving your units evasive. Whereas before, I think You Can Fly was maybe the only option that we had to give evasive to units, and I just don't think that's enough. But here, this could really open up different deck archetypes among different inks. And I will say that Flounder looks pretty scared of the shark, but yeah. Ariel herself, she is looking calm, so cool. I think she knows she's getting away. She just knows how evasive she is. So
yeah, I love Flounder's expression.
Yes, I feel like this is a good example of a super rare card where you can kind of use this to supplement a deck or even build a deck around this concept, and it's just more of a unique mechanic that might change how people play the game.
Yeah, and I will say having the 3 willpower as an evasive, that's proven to be kind of difficult for a lot of decks to remove. So it's just a better option. Let's say if you don't want to necessarily run Fidget, if you want to try to counter it a different way. I know she doesn't have 3 strength, but if you just want to use her to quest too or sing songs and not be able to be challenged by the opponents, that 3 willpower really does help. So very cool looking card there. And so that is it for the spoilers we're looking at for this episode. There's a lot more still to come. I'm very excited to see what those might be.
Yeah, the reveals have really been picking up lately, and we're getting pretty close to the release of set 3, so it's going to be an exciting time for Lorcana fans. And
yeah, I think it's just coming up on 16 days or something like that until set 3 comes out, so not too much longer to wait.
Yeah, so thanks for sticking with us through this video, and we appreciate all of you, and we will be back soon. So
yeah, thank you.
Thanks again.
Catch you later.